Before we resume, I can announce the following proposition has been lodged: trainee minimum wage P5 of 2023, lodged by Deputy Andrews.
So just before we begin, Deputy Porret has let me know that unfortunately she wasn't feeling well over the lunch break, and so she just asked if she could be noted as absent because she's ill for the rest of the day.
In which case, probably if she wishes to be marked absent by reason of mallard as opposed to just absent, someone should take the oath. Are you prepared to do that?
Absolutely so.
Griffin.
Vous saurez que Madame Porret est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé.
Very well. I shall make my note accordingly. Yes, I have next noted to speak on the principles Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. It's clear that the scrutiny panel has done a thorough job, and it was good to see their recommendations, which I would have liked to see all accepted. The replacement vessel scheme will encourage boats to increase in size, and I am not convinced that this will not result in unsustainable fishing practices and work against our own fishing industry. I appreciate that officers have worked hard on this. However, I cannot support it while our Jersey fishing industry have real, genuine concerns, and they are not supportive of these regulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak in second reading? Deputy Moran.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank everyone, particularly the scrutiny panel, for the work they've undertaken over the past few weeks. I just wanted to say, in response to members who have voiced concern about the future of the fishing industry and in more general terms, and I think people who have spoken about that are absolutely right to be concerned. And I just wanted to reassure members that it is also a huge concern for the government itself. And we are engaged with the fishing sector. Indeed, I met them just in the past week as part of our Marine Economy Advisory Group. And obviously in that group, I listened to their concerns themselves, but also was able to advise them of the £300,000 support scheme that we will be bringing in, that will be paying out money in the next few months, and of our genuine commitment to ensure that we do have a sustainable fishery into the long term, and that it will be very heavily managed in an appropriate way. And it is the Environment Minister who will undertake that management. And I can say he has my full faith that he will do so appropriately. We are, as far as these regulations are concerned, there's no question, just one amongst a number of parties, including the UK, European Union, France, the regions of Normandy and Brittany, that has to work together to find resolution and to find ways forward. These regulations represent a way forward that has been accepted by both the French, the European, and the UK sides as well. And so it's really important to understand that I think even if we were to say no to these regulations, we don't really have another way forward for them there. It's the case is because we have to get agreement amongst all those parties. That is the way it is. But from a government perspective, we will continue to work to develop the fishing industry in all its forms. And that does mean looking at new methods of fishing, much more sustainable methods of fishing. It does mean marine protected areas. It does mean making the most of our territorial waters in all ways which enhance the economy, but most importantly, which protect the incredible wildlife that lives within those seas. So I just wanted to speak to reassure members that this government is entirely committed to the fishing sector and will continue to be throughout its term. And I hope that we can move beyond I hope that we can adopt these regulations and then move forward, because without these regulations, we won't be able to move forward at all, sir. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak in second reading? Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. I'm actually just speaking to respond in a way to Deputy Morel's affirmation, because if he had consultation lately with the fishing industry and got involved with his officers, he would also be probably aware that his officers also consider that this increase in vessel size and power would give advantage to French vessels over our local ones. And that's the worrying part that made me not being able to support this. And maybe if this proposition would have been taken in parts, the rest would have been acceptable. But the part that disadvantages our local ones is the one that I can't agree with. Thank you.
Point of clarification, please, sir.
Are you prepared to give way for a point of clarification?
Thank you, sir. I was just wondering if the if Deputy Kovac could clarify when she said his officers, did she mean officers from the Economy Department, and was this in their representations to scrutiny?
No, it was in personal questions.
I didn't understand. Sorry, sir, I didn't understand.
I believe the answer was personal impression. Was that right? Personal.
No, personal discussions.
Oh, so not in a representation to scrutiny and not in any public or verifiable format?
No.
Does any other member wish to speak in second reading? No other member wishes to speak in second reading? I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to start by thanking the Environment, Infrastructure and Housing Scrutiny Panel and their officers for working at great speed to complete their review of this proposition so that it could be brought back to the Assembly at this sitting. It is important that we debate and I hope pass this proposition in a timely manner so that we can complete the implementation of a new set of rules for the French fleet fishing in our waters. And I'd also like to thank members for their considered contributions to this debate. I'll come back to the scrutiny report and to members' speeches shortly, but I'd like to preface my comments with a thought about the bigger picture. Last Wednesday, February the 1st, was a big day in the management of fishing in our waters. It was the day we began issuing licenses to the French fishing fleet that, for the first time, included permits setting out limits within which they must fish, what is known as the extent and nature of the French fleet's fishing activities. We have 136 French vessels licensed to fish in our waters, and each one now has a permit specifying what it can catch, using what gear, and how much it can catch. So this is the start of a new era in fisheries management for Jersey. Not within living memory have we had this degree of visibility and control over the activities of the French fleet. When it comes to fisheries management, this is a good time to be Jersey's Environment Minister. So let me turn to the matter at hand. If we look at the proposition, there are a series of changes to consider. They relate to the 1994 Sea Fisheries Jersey Law and to the Sea Fisheries Licensing of Fishing Boats Jersey Regulations 2003 as amended. I don't propose to recap the details of all those changes, most of which are technical in nature. I'm going to concentrate on the most significant change, namely that which is made to paragraph 2, J2 of Article 7 of the 1994 law, and in particular Part B, which allows the creation of an additional category of replacement vessel. It says that the minister may grant a license for a replacement vessel which the minister decides to accept as a substitute vessel, having regard to the policy published by the minister from time to time. And members will have seen that policy published more than 3 weeks ago. Many members have sought reassurance in their speeches that this new policy does not give too much to our French neighbours, perhaps at the expense of our own fleet. Members have also queried whether, even if the policy works now, might it be changed in the future to the detriment of Jersey? I believe I can give reassurance on these and all the other points raised. Let me start with Deputy Scott, who wondered in her speech if the changes to the replacement vessel policy were really necessary. Have we been dragooned into an unfavourable interpretation of the TCA? No, sir, that is not the case. Jersey and Guernsey, supported by the UK and the EU and France, have all interpreted the requirement to reflect the, quote, actual extent and nature, unquote, of fishing in the track record period, which is the key clause of the agreement, as requiring the Crown dependencies and EU to enable a static level of fishing activity to be maintained in their waters by fishing vessels of the other party. A static level of fishing activity. That bit was agreed early on and is not controversial. Let me turn then to the replacement vessel policy. The reason it needs to change, as I explained in the previous debate, is that the existing policy is highly restrictive, and if we kept it, we would be in danger of reducing the ability of the French fleet to maintain its fishing effort, which we cannot do under the TCA. The policy that I've published allows me discretion to license a replacement vessel that is slightly larger than the vessel it replaces on two parameters: its gross tonnage and its engine powers. Not length, by the way, as the Connétable of Saint Brelade suggested. But, and this is absolutely critical, the overall tonnage and power of the French fleet cannot increase. In other words, if there is an application for a replacement vessel that is larger than the original boat, then there must be a reduction elsewhere in the fleet. This could be achieved by retiring another boat, in other words, effectively by handing in its license, or it could be achieved if another vessel was replaced with a boat that was smaller than the original boat. Either way, the total tonnage and total power, engine power of the French fleet cannot increase. Now that seems pretty clear, but the JFA and scrutiny have raised some questions because of the detailed way in which the policy might actually play out in practice. To understand those objections, and I hope deal with them, I'm going to have to dive into some of the detail. Because a crucial part of the policy I've published is that it divides the French fleet into two categories: those under 12 metres and those over 12 metres. Vessels under 12 metres can have replacements that increase in size up to the 12-metre threshold, but their increase in engine power is limited. It must remain below 221 kilowatts. Very important, there can be no migration between the size classes. In other words, none of the 108 vessels can be replaced by a vessel over 12 metres. We'll never have more than 28 vessels over 12 metres, which is the number that currently are in existence. In the over 12 metre category, things are a little more restrictive. A replacement vessel in this category can only increase its engine power by 10% and its gross tonnage by 20%, always remembering that any increase can only happen if there is an equivalent or greater reduction elsewhere in the French fleet. It's also important to know that any further replacement vessels, a replacement of a replacement vessel, if you like, has to refer back to the original boat. There can be no incremental increases in size over time. So Deputy Southern's point about the French fleet gradually getting bigger and bigger is not what's going to happen. So what is the problem then? Scrutiny have identified three potential issues, and I think it's worth tackling each one in turn, because I hope that way I can give members the reassurance that they've been seeking earlier in this debate. First, they argued that the replacement vessel policy could have the unintended consequence of allowing a shift from what they call latent or unused effort into active fishing effort. According to the JFA, there are a number of smaller boats that do very little fishing in Jersey waters. Those boats could be retired and the tonnage and engine size donated to bigger and more active replacement vessels in the over 12 metre class. In this way, tonnage and engine power could migrate over time from the less active smaller boats to the more active bigger boats, and the fishing effort would therefore increase. There are two reasons why this is not an issue. The first is that the actual migration of tonnage and engine power from the under 12 metre to the over 12 metre category can only ever be minor. Officers have calculated that if every single one of the 28 vessels over 12 metres was replaced with a vessel that maxed out on its allowable increases in engine power and gross tonnage, then only 3.5% of the fleet's total engine power and around 12% of its total gross tonnage would migrate into the bigger class of boats. It's just not that big a deal. But there's an even more fundamental reason why it is not possible for fishing effort to increase as a consequence of the replacement vessel policy. The argument is that there's a latent or unused effort in the French fleet. So I'm afraid the concept of latent effort doesn't really exist. This is because all licensed boats are entitled to fish to the limits of their permits. And those boats that do not intend to use their entitlement in any year can redistribute their permitted effort elsewhere in the fleet. There is no latent unused effort because the French redistribute all the fishing effort to the boats that need and can use it. If a boat that used to fish for scallops decide not to fish for scallops, then that just means its permit gets handed out to a boat that will fish for them. Therefore, the replacement vessel policy will have no bearing on the total effort of the French fleet because all of the permitted effort is being used. So I repeat, there is no latent or unused effort in the French fleet. The second big issue raised by scrutiny in the JFA concerns enforcement. I think essentially you could sum it up as saying the JFA don't believe that the permit framework will be effective because the French will simply exceed the permit controls. Indeed, as has been pointed out in the debate, I was called naive for my belief that we could adequately police their permits. So if I may, that made me smile a little bit. I will just note that the JFA also implied last year that I was naive for believing that the French would agree to extend to nature permits. They told me that now that the French had their licenses, they would never accept restrictions on what they could catch. Well, they have. I was right, and they were wrong. But what of enforcement? I tell you what, when I look at the situation today with regards to enforcement, I feel very lucky. Just look at the previous situation. On January 1st, 2021, there were 342 French vessels with licenses to fish in Jersey waters. Jersey had no say in the métiers, the methods, if you like, that those vessels could prosecute, the level of fishing effort that could be expended, and the amount they could catch. Jersey had no say in licensing, including for replacement vessels. Fisheries management was covered by French regulations, over which Jersey had no say. The net effect? We had to estimate the number of vessels fishing in our waters, what they were doing, how they were doing it, and what was being caught. Contrast that with where we are now. There are 136 licenses available to French vessels. Licensing occurs in Jersey, including for replacement vessels. Each vessel must fish according to the terms of the fishing permits that Jersey will issue to it. Those fishing permits dictate the gears the vessel may use, the species they may target, and the levels of fishing effort the vessel may expend. The collective level of fishing effort is fixed and cannot expand. So is the size of the fleet. We will know at the start of each year what the expected effort and yield should be for each stock. Under the terms of their license, French vessels must submit their daily catch data within 48 hours of landing. That's something that's already in place, and they do submit that data. All vessels must be VMS enabled, that is, fitted with a satellite tracking system. So for the first time ever, we know what to expect in terms of fishing activity for the year ahead across the entire French fleet and can monitor it in real time. Compared to what has gone before, it is just light years ahead in terms of our ability to monitor and enforce fishing permits. Well, yes, but can we actually stop fishers flouting the rules? The first point is, since July 1st last year, we can track every French boat via VMS, as I've said. Scrutiny asked how we will know that a boat has fitted its satellite tracker. Well, it's a legal requirement in France for all fishing vessels to be VMS enabled. They would be in breach of French law if they didn't. And given the extent of regulation of the fishing industry in France, we do not consider it at all likely that a French vessel will operate without VMS. The other point is we know the patterns of activity that accompany various types of fishing, so we can get a rough estimate of how much fish they're catching on any given visit. We also respond to tip-offs. So if there's something suspicious, whether it's in the tracking data or from tip-offs, we have two boats, the Normand Le Broc and the Rib, that can go and take a look. As a jurisdiction, we have a good reputation and record for enforcement in our waters. In 2021, the last year for which we have compiled statistics, fisheries boats made 258 inspection checks, and the Normand Le Broc on its own travelled 2,500 nautical miles. And that was a low year because it was still being affected by COVID, so boarding was difficult. So this is definitely not just desk-based enforcement. Scrutiny also asked about penalties. The penalties for the breach of licence conditions are clearly set out in the legislation. If found guilty, the fisher is liable to an unlimited fine, disqualification from holding a licence for a period of time, and the forfeiture of fish, net or gear. Actual penalties are, of course, decided by the courts, not me, but it will be apparent that these are potentially very significant penalties, which will act as a deterrent to someone thinking of gambling their livelihood on a bit of quota busting. Sir, I have every confidence that we will be able to monitor the French fleet to a much, much higher standard than has been possible before because we have the technology and the powers to do so. Can I guarantee that there won't be some rule breaking? No. But what I can say is that the replacement vessel policy will make no difference to the job of enforcement. If there are weaknesses in enforcement, they apply equally whether we have a slightly more relaxed replacement vessel policy or not. And of course, we can also react if it becomes clear that we need to improve our enforcement. Finally, concerns have been raised about fisheries management. Will slightly larger French vessels cause greater environmental damage? Let's remember, they can't catch any more fish. Let's also remember that it is a vessel's fishing permit that limits the amount it can catch, not its size. And let's put this in perspective. A 10% increase in power, which is all the larger boats are allowed, is the equivalent of trading in your 1 litre Ford Fiesta for a 1.1 litre. Yep, it's more powerful, but it's not a Range Rover. And of course, as I keep saying, the total tonnage and engine power of the fleet is capped, so a bigger replacement vessel can only be agreed if capacity has been freed up elsewhere in the fleet. There's something else to bear in mind. Under the TCA, I have additional management powers. Article 494 contains the fisheries objectives and principles, which includes applying the precautionary approach, promoting long-term sustainability, protecting juvenile fish and spawning aggregations, minimising harmful impact of fishing on the marine ecosystem, timely data sharing, and so on. So if we ever did feel that fishing practices were causing more environmental damage, then the tools exist to respond through the TCA. Those are tools that I will not use willfully and without consultation with all affected parties. But members may not be surprised to learn that effective management of a sustainable fisheries is a very high priority of mine. So we have spent the last 2 years trying to get to a system of fisheries management that is fair to all sides and compliant with the TCA. We now have a licence system, and each of those licences comes with a permit. The final piece of the jigsaw puzzle is to make our replacement vessel policy slightly more flexible. The French fleet have perfectly good reasons for wanting this flexibility, not least, as has already been noted, because their boats operate across wider areas. For that reason, this proposed replacement vessel policy has been developed alongside Guernsey and the UK so that whatever we agree will dovetail with their policies. This means that a French fisher wanting to replace their boat will know that it can easily be made to fit all 3 jurisdictions in which it is likely to fish. The scrutiny panel asks us to consider dividing up the under 12-metre part of the French fleet into many smaller subcategories and preventing tonnage or engine power from moving between categories. Sir, this is a solution to a problem that simply doesn't exist. We already have all the controls we need to manage the fishing effort of the French fleet. Were we to restrict replacement vessels in this way, we would be causing immense administrative complication. We would undermine compatibility with neighbouring jurisdictions, with a risk that the policy would be judged so restrictive as to be in breach of our commitment to maintain the French fleet's fishing effort, and all to achieve something that the policy I have already set out already achieves. That is why I cannot support it. However, I am very happy to commit to return to scrutiny to review how the policy is working, and of course I would do the same if I were to propose changes to that policy. In doing so, I would open up the possibility that a proposition could be brought before this Assembly asking me to withdraw or modify that policy. That may not give Deputy Rob Ward total assurance, but I think it goes quite a long way down that road. Sir, I have spent a lot of time explaining the detail of this policy and how it applies to the French fleet. I have not discussed the Jersey fleet because neither the extent and nature provisions or the replacement vessel policy that apply to EU vessels are applicable to our fleet. But that does not mean the Jersey fleet has not been in our thoughts. Members will be aware that this government has made considerable progress on several issues of importance to our fishers. Already, the External Relations Minister has pointed out the work that's been done to improve port opening times, and my colleague, the Economic Development Minister, has made available support packages and continues to work with his officers and with the fishers to find more and better measures. Now we have in place a licence and permit system for the first time gives us the ability to monitor and control fishing activity of foreign boats in our waters. Sir, I said at the start that this was the start of a new era in fisheries management for Jersey, but I believe it is also the start of a new era for our own fleet. We should be proud of what has been achieved over the last couple of years. This replacement vessel proposition is part of a groundbreaking package of measures that are good for our fishing fleet, good for Jersey, fair to our French and EU neighbours, and a solid foundation on which to build stronger environmental protection into the future. So I move the second reading and call for the appel.
That is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the adoption of the regulations in second reading. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The regulations have been adopted in second reading, 34 votes pour, 9 votes contre, no abstentions. Do you move the matter in
please, sir.
the 9? Yes.
Those members voting contre, Deputies Southern, Rob Ward, Owls, Mezek, Coles, Scott, Catherine Curtis, Phelps and Kovac.
Do you move the regulations in third reading, Minister?
Yes, sir.
Are the regulations seconded for third reading? Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Conor St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. I'd just like to say a few words and congratulate the Minister and his officers for the amount of effort and time that have gone into this proposition. The reality, sir, is that I think it's important ongoing that the Minister gets the our fishing fleet on side. And I would urge him to accept offers or invitations to go out to sea for a day or so and see how it works in practice. And I'm sure he'll find that very enlightening and contribute to his discretion, which he'll be able to use in the future. So my congratulations to go to the Minister, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. I know the third reading is not the time to do it, so I won't address the issue of latent effort, where I would disagree with the Minister. I would remind him that power is not something that you calculate by whether you have a 1,000 or 1,100 cc engine, that a smaller capacity engine can be a lot more powerful than a large cc engine. And I would say to him that his policy does not actually do what scrutiny asked for, even though he said it did. But I agree, sir, this is a new era for Jersey fishing. We have more visibility and control than we've ever had before, and despite our arguments as to whether we've given too much away, there's no doubt that all the countries involved agree with the way forward, and it will guarantee a static level of fishing activity in our waters. So I will be supporting this. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Scott.
So the reason why I was still feeling hesitant about supporting these regulations, bearing in mind that much of it is just to do with the underlying policy, is I totally accept that Jersey has actually evolved insofar as it's now in a position where it can grant permits, and indeed it has, to French fishing boats, many more, to fish in our waters than our indigenous fleet, which is smaller and has smaller boats. Where I still find myself kind of hesitant is really understanding the urgency, because this was very much presented to me originally as something that had to be done in order for the licenses to be granted. They had to be granted urgently. And they've been brought, and yet licenses to fish have been actually granted. We're talking about replacement licenses, and we're talking about for whom. So I still find myself disappointed that perhaps there hasn't been more of a focus on this, as well as perhaps more comfort, because if something is actually reasonable, I'm sure that the Jersey, the fishermen would be accepting that. They're not the sort of people go and block ports and that sort of thing just because they're upset about it. I do believe that they are quite reasonable and able to understand, and indeed have spent a lot of time trying to understand the regulations themselves. So I would welcome more content on this in order to change my position. So I just thought I could give the opportunity for that to be done.
So the other member wish to speak in Deputy Joseph.
So very briefly, may I say I was incredibly impressed with the way the Environment Minister addressed the Assembly in the second reading, and clearly as the overwhelming majority and support of the States Assembly. And this Assembly I will be transmitting the news of hopefully this positive move. So I have a saying, doing the right thing is always the right thing, and this Assembly has dealt with this issue professionally and properly based upon analysis and evidence, and that will put us in good standing when we are trying to get the efforts that we're making to get our fishing fleet more accessible in French waters. And we will work tirelessly on the basis of the professional approach that the Minister has taken. I think that shows the professional of Jersey that we are a small island, but we do things properly. Doing the right thing is always the right thing, and we expect the French to do the same thing in relation to opening their ports wider and accepting our fishers on the same basis. And I think that this is a very good day, and it gives me further enthusiasm and encouragement to work with French counterparts to get what we need for our Jersey fishers in those French markets, as I know the Economic Development Minister wants me to do.
Any other member wish to speak in third reading? No other member wishes to speak in third reading? I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Help, please.
Well, the Minister hasn't responded yet.
we
think we know the appel is coming.
Deputy Farnham is perhaps slightly bored of hearing me speak. It looks like I should be preparing my sea legs and take up an offer of going out on a fishing boat. Let's hope the good fisher folk of Jersey are not so unhappy with me that they don't turf me overboard at some point just off Noirmont. To respond to Deputy Scott's point, the urgency is this, that the French fleet has had some replacement vessel applications in for some time. I had to turn one down before Christmas because under the existing policy it would not fit. I think there's half a dozen French vessels that are currently in line and have been for several months. So I think the urgency of this is that, as I explained when we discussed the principles, that we didn't want to move on replacement vessels until we had extent and nature, because the whole point is once you've got permits, you separate the fishing effort from the size of the boat. Within reason, it doesn't matter how big the boat is, if it's tied to a permit that limits its catch. So once we have that in place, we no longer have a good reason for not allowing a slight relaxation in the replacement vessel policy, because it enables them to match the efforts that they have under the present one. Members may remember that the reason why they can't, if they stick to the current vessel policy, is that it requires them to be equal or less than on 4 different parameters. And the actual consequence of being equal or less to on 4 different parameters when you're buying second-hand boats is that you will almost certainly only hit one of those parameters and the rest will have to be lower. And therefore, over time, your fleet will shrink in its size and effort. So that's the reason why we have to do it. And it's been done, sequenced in this way quite deliberately in order to make sure that we had the guarantees that we needed before we went down this road. In the past, fishing effort has been the only tool we've had to maintain control over fishing effort, because we didn't control the permits and we didn't control the licenses, was to control the size of the boats. Now we have licensing and we have permits, we can afford that slight relaxation, but within those strict limits that I have outlined. So that's the reason for it. But sir, if I could call for the appel.
It's called for. I invite members to return to their seats. I ask you to open the voting. The vote is on the adoption of the regulations in third reading. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, and I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the regulations are adopted in third reading, 34 votes pour, 8 votes contre, 1 abstention. Very well. We now come to the draft Social Security Amendment of Law Number 17, Jersey Regulations P110, lodged by the Minister for Social Security. The main responder will be the Chair of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel, Deputy Southern, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Social Security Amendment of Law Number 17, Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Article 50 of the Social Security Jersey Law 1974.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. There was an amendment also filed to these regulations. Can I take the
It's a matter of the Assembly. I was going to invite, I was going to ask you whether you were going to take them as amended when we came to second reading.
Oh, apologies.
But no, we could, I mean, I don't see any reason why the Assembly can't agree to take them as amended, but at this point, members agree to take it as amended by the amendment of the Minister. Very well, when we come to second reading, we'll assume they're read as amended.
Thank you very
Carry on,
much.
please.
Thank you, sir. I'm bringing these regulations to amend the Social Security Jersey Law 1974 to stop the state's grant to the Social Security Fund for 2023. This is a consequence of the government plan for 2023, which was approved by the States Assembly in December, which envisaged the grant not being paid. These regulations are entirely mechanical and make a small change to part of the Social Security law to permit this to happen. In normal circumstances, the state's grant helps to create a regular level of total income into the Social Security Fund each year. Stopping the grant for 2023 means the Treasury Minister will have an extra £71 million available in the Consolidated Fund. The Social Security Fund, meanwhile, will use reserves from the Social Security Reserve Fund to help pay for the scheme's working age contributory benefits and the old age pension during 2023. The government plan also sets out that the state's grant will be returned to its full value of some £82 million in 2024. This is an important source of funding to the fund to ensure its long-term financial sustainability. The Social Security funds in total have approximately £2.1 billion of reserves. This is equivalent to 7 years' worth of Social Security pensions and contributory benefits. We expect to use some of these reserves over the next 20 years to pay for the sharply increasing cost of Social Security pensions for the ageing population. The actuaries are reviewing the Social Security funds now, and I expect to be able to publish their report, including new financial projections, early in Q2 of this year. This will support us in our long-term planning, looking forward for some 60 years for the Social Security Fund and considering any changes in policy that might be necessary. I'm confident that this change for 2023 will not affect the ability of the Social Security Fund to pay out Social Security pensions in the future, nor will it affect its ability to pay out contributory benefits to people who need them, such as our sickness and incapacity benefits or our parental benefits. Sir, I would be glad to answer any questions that members may have, and I propose the principles. Thank
Are the principles seconded?
Sir.
Any member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir. And although my panel has not had the time to take this proposition and investigate it in depth, initially I thought that this was a matter of just time passing, in that I believe we've already agreed that the States grant will not be paid up to the tune of £71 million into this account. And that 2024, the system, the whole system, will return to normal and we'll be paying our contributions back into the fund. However, with giving it some thought, it seems to me that we can't just nod this through. We took a decision some time back, 2 years ago, to effectively rob the Social Security Fund of money that we were due to give it. And that seems to me, because the Social Security Fund is supposed to be ring-fenced, i.e. it's there only to support benefits and especially of those benefits, pensions. That's what it's there for. And here we are, without a by your leave, saying, let's do away with £71 million of that, despite the fact that it's been collected. And the question must remain, I think, and the question needs to be asked and needs to be answered as to what are you going to do, ministers, with this £71 million? Is it really more important to spend that and to allocate it to the consolidation fund prior to spending it? Or is it more appropriate in current circumstances that we don't do that? And that we take away from this fund £71 million. To what use is that £71 million being put? Is it really worth more than abandoning the principle of ring fencing? And who knows, in a few years down the line, that ring fence may be done away with. But it shouldn't be done away now, I don't think. I think we've been given an opportunity here, for whatever reasons, to reconsider the decision that we made two and a half years ago to scrap the way of doing things, the grant, which pays for, bear in mind, which pays for, it's supposed to pay for, those people who don't earn enough to get a full Social Security pension. It compensates them and tops them up so that they can. So it actually is a very useful tool for countering poverty. But the central question that I would ask, and I want it answered with specific examples, what are we going to spend this on? Is it really as important as all that, or should we reconsider, rethink, re-vote on whether we do actually do as the Minister says? And I look forward to hearing what the Minister has to say in specifics about where is this money going to go? Or should it really be put back in the fund and let's carry on as normal? Do we actually need to do this? This decision was taken 2 years ago. So the questions must be answered, I hope, today. Otherwise, they won't be getting my vote.
Deputy Barbara Wall.
Thank you, sir. May I first declare an interest, since I'm actually a pensioner. However, I do not believe that gives rise to any conflict of interest, because what I want to say relates only to the generality of the way in Jersey that pensions are provided in law and financed by taxpayers. My paper today is based on my experience of some 20 plus years as a trustee on a multi-billion-pound pension fund, working closely with actuaries, investment managers and advisors, and I hope you find my views helpful. I know that this proposition is on the surface merely about giving legal effect to one aspect of the government plan, which the Assembly approved last year, and I have to include myself in that. But having now looked more carefully at what has and been done, I have actually changed my mind. I thank the Minister for bringing this to the Assembly, which provides the opportunity for us to debate. Pension matters are very important aspects of Ireland life, which hardly got the attention it warranted in that earlier debate of the government plan. Pension funds on the whole are contributory funds by the members. In our case, it's the people of Jersey, the employees, employers and the grant from the government. It's there to provide monies and support for retirement purposes and many other health benefits, doctor's visits, prescriptions, low-income families, etc. If we look back to March 2020, the states agreed to the cessation of a states grant transfer for the years 20, 21 and 22. That's a total of just short of £207 million, with the grant value returning to its underlying formula led value in 2023. That's this year. I therefore ask, why has this date changed to 2024 from what was originally agreed, especially when we, the public, have recently been advised that the pandemic has now subsided and that it is to be treated like unto all community viruses and infections. So why is this, I thought it was 72 million, but I'm advised by the Minister, £71 million, being proposed to be withheld again from the Social Security Fund? And what is the withheld grant being used for, now that the original emergency needed to cover for COVID is over? On page 74 of the government plan, it states very clearly, and I quote, "Borrowing for the impact of COVID-19 is expected to be repaid in full by the end of 22. We were further advised at a fiscal presentation at St Paul's Centre and this week, confirming it had been paid. If this amendment is agreed, the Social Security Fund will have lost some £278+ million. That's from 2020 to 23. This is a huge loss of income and investment to the fund, and in turn, a loss of 2%, that's nearly £6 million, into the health insurance fund. During this period, the Social Security has had and will be having to go forward and dip in to the reserve fund to ensure pension and benefit payments have and will be met. And that's at a tune of over £300+ million a year. What I find most worrying is the reality that if the Social Security Fund closed tomorrow, there's only enough funds in the Social Security to pay for the next 7 years, which is very concerning for a 60-year pension fund. It'll be interesting to see the actuarial report says as to whether this fund is adequately funded for the length of its 60-year term. As at present, it clearly is not. We are guided by the Minister. The report is due for early 23. Well, it's early 23 now. So where's the review? How can we justify keeping another huge sum of money back from the pensions pot for all when we don't even yet have the actuary's up-to-date opinion on the state of the fund? When we do finally get the report, we can only imagine how grim a picture it might be. More pensioners calling on the fund, a worsening ratio between the employed who pay Social Security and the retired, higher inflation, cost of living crises, more people and families needing income support, poorer investment performance, and so on. Indeed, with no action taken, as the government plan itself said, by the 2070s, the fund would be down to only 4 times cover of annual spending. This is unsustainable. And yet the Minister wants to take the further risk of keeping another £71 million away from the fund this year and draw down more of the Social Security reserves. instead to meet benefit obligations. It just doesn't make sense. The ring-fenced Social Security Fund or any other pension fund is not and must not be used as a piggy bank for a government or employer to dip into as the go-to alternative. In our case, with the COVID, rather than use our own savings account, like we should have done with the Rainy Day Fund, which in Jersey was established to cover costs in severe circumstances. In my view, the COVID pandemic was a perfect example of a severe circumstance for Jersey and the world. Therefore, the Rainy Day Fund should have been the go-to in the first instance, in an open and transparent way, and not take money out of a ring-fenced pension fund. I have 3 questions for the Minister, if I may. May I ask the Minister to have, for the past year's government grant shortfall, that's between 207 and 278 million, to be paid back into the Social Security Fund to ensure protection of the fund going forward and be invested like regular savings in order to pay for future old age pensions and benefits, the potential for which is getting bigger and bigger. My second question, Minister, is about her to commit to presenting the actuarial review to this Assembly and its citizens the moment it is published, and to tell us now, in her winding up speech, what the exact state of play is with the report. And 3, may I ask the Minister to say whether she or anybody else has received the report already? For now, sir, I regret that I cannot support this proposition, as in my view, this is a thoroughly bad proposal, even though I did vote in favour of the government plan as a whole previously, as I've set out. This is a truly serious, big matter, and I hope many other members will think likewise and vote against this amendment / proposition. Thank you, sir, and the Assembly for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Balash.
Sir, may I also declare that I am a pensioner, but I don't think that I need to declare an interest in the context of this debate, because I think that everyone in this Assembly has an interest in the Social Security Fund. I'm glad to follow the last 2 speakers because I agree very much with both of them. The Minister's report states that the last Assembly agreed in 2020, 2021 and 2022 to stop the state's grant, and I quote, to help with the exceptional circumstances and costs of COVID-19. But no explanation is given in the report as to why the payment is being stopped in 2023. Perhaps I missed it, but I didn't hear in the Minister's speech any explanation of what the reason for this proposition is either. And I assume that it is really just to cover a gap in the island's finances. This is very disappointing because the government seems not yet to have abandoned the irresponsible approach to social security funds, which was the policy of the last government and indeed the last Assembly. These funds are not pots of money to be dipped into at will to cover some crisis or a gap in current government finances. That is not why they were created. They were created and belong, they do not belong to the government or indeed to the states for that matter. They belong to the people of Jersey. They have been built up by employers and employees and the states in order to secure the pensions of current pensioners and pensioners to come. The clue is in the name. They give security to pensioners. They ensure that there will be, for the foreseeable future, enough money to pay the pensions of the elderly. The Minister expressed confidence in the ability of the fund to pay out future pensions and obligations. But when she replies, I would be glad to know on what she bases that confidence. So nearly everyone in this island has an interest in these funds. In the health insurance fund debate, I described the government's proposals as plundering. And this is no different, except in relation to the scale. The amounts that will have been taken from the Social Security Fund, if these regulations are adopted, are truly staggering. They amount to nearly £300 million over the years 2020 to 2023, or more than 10% of the reserve fund. It may be said, sir, that the money is not being taken out of the fund. It is just that money is not being paid in. But that, in my view, would be sophistry, a clever but false argument. The 1974 law requires the states to put money into the fund in accordance with a set formula in order to cover the cost of the pensions of those whose contributions are not high enough to fund their pensions, the less well off. Article 4 provides, and I quote, there shall be paid into the Social Security Fund out of monies provided by the states such amounts as are determined in accordance with Article 9A for the purpose of contributing to the cost of supplementing contributions. By not contributing in 2023, it will be necessary for £89 million to be drawn down from the reserve fund in order to meet the fund's liabilities. The pension fund will be worse off to that extent. Interestingly, and the Attorney General might like to ponder this, there is a derogation from the obligation contained in Article 4 for 2020, but not for 2021, 2022, or 2023. And in due course, perhaps he might like to confirm that the regulations actually will achieve what they set out to do. But I'm not making a legal point, I am making a political point. The government may say that the fund can afford to lose £89 million, but I would say, sir, that that is unknown in advance of the actuary's report. When the Minister replies, I'd like to know whether she has seen a draft of the actuary's report. It was due to be delivered in early 2023, and the custom is for the actuary to allow ministers to see a draft of the report before it is actually published. And if she has, what does it say about the failure of the states to pay in nearly £300 million over the past 4 years? What is the general state of the fund? Would it not be sensible, indeed, to defer debate on these regulations until we know what is in the actuary's report? But I assume the Minister will say that the fund can afford it. But even if it can, that is really not the point. The point is whether the fund should be depleted in this way. If there is a surplus in the Social Security Fund, I can think of several ways in which the surplus might be better spent. The state pension could be increased in real terms so that it gets closer to the living wage. Some pensioners have to go through the hoops of applying for income support in order to survive financially. Or a greater proportion than 2% could be attributed to the health insurance fund, which might then be able to set up a dental treatment benefit. Either of those would comply with the purposes for which the funds were established, and indeed the spirit of the 1974 law. It is not appropriate, sir, in my view, to deplete the Social Security Fund in order to meet other financial pressures on the states. The Social Security Fund is the property of somebody else, the island's pensioners. Depleting it is tantamount to the misappropriation of pensioners' property, and that is not something that the states should properly do. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And I just wanted to, I was prompted to speak, sir, because I heard the chair of the Health and Social Services Scrutiny Panel mischaracterise what is happening here. The chair referred to the spending of the ring-fenced funds. The funds haven't been ring-fenced because they're not in the fund, sir. And these aren't employee or employer contributions, sir. They are ring-fenced and they are within the fund, and that is where they remain. So I would also take issue with Deputy Balash's characterisation of this as sophistry. There has been no sophistry going on. The sophistry was trying to claim that the funds are already in the fund when they're not, sir. That's the sophistry that was portrayed by the chair of the Health and Social Services panel. And so I just wanted to clarify, these are not funds that are in there. These are funds that are outside of the Social Security Fund. That, I think, is a really important clarification. I think we will find we're in something of a bind as a States Assembly if the States Assembly were to reject this, because the States Assembly, that is all of us here, sir, as an Assembly have accepted the government plan. And the government plan has this transfer of funds within it. And so should the States Assembly choose to reject this, sir, somebody somewhere in the government is going to be losing £70 million. Now that could be health, that could be education, that could be GPs, that could be nurses. I don't know, because that would be £70 million, which has been spent by this Assembly, sir, or allocated by this Assembly elsewhere. So, sir, I think it's an interesting bind we'll find ourselves in, because somebody, a department, many departments, are going to have to lose £70 million that this Assembly has already spent, sir. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. It's interesting to follow that. A couple of things. I didn't think this would be a very interesting debate, sir, but actually there's a couple of really interesting points that's come up. The first one from the last speaker I'll say is, actually not everyone voted for the government plan, so please don't tar us all with the same brush. And so therefore, I think that's a really important point to make. Also, I would say that it's an interesting argument to say that someone will be short of money if we don't do this. So perhaps the Minister could detail where this £72 million is going, because it's an allocation of funds across a government plan, and there isn't real detail in this as to where it's going. The other interesting thing, sir, was to see a split within the Jersey Liberal Conservatives. It's really difficult to keep a party together. And so it's very interesting to see that. Nice to see, actually, in one way, to see how that mechanism is addressed. It would be nice to see. So the question with this is, again, my concern is just simply, there's a fund there that we keep drawing from, and I think this is in the back of a lot of people's minds. And when does that stop? There are some funds which, whatever we do, we don't touch. You don't do that, they're important, have them in the background. But this one isn't, and I think this is a slow decline, as you might say. I know it says in the proposition that in future years the money will be allocated as normal, but it won't take long to bring in a proposition from government, the next government plan to do the same again. Probably lodged late, to be honest, sir, but that's just me being, forgive my cynicism. But that's okay, because that's allowed nowadays. And so subsequently, we'll move forward. So I just want to point out again, we've got to be very careful when we remove money from funds and to not tar us all with the same brush, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased to follow the last speaker, of course, because as he knows, the government plan is governed by public finances and the statutory obligation along when that has to be lodged. So it's not simply governed by standing orders. He is, of course, right to point out taxpayers pay money to government. That comes into one big pot, and then the States Assembly agrees various heads of expenditure during the government plan process. And so in the agreeing of those heads of expenditure, this money is allocated and is part of that big pot that then gets divvied up as this Assembly agrees. And it is interesting that during that government plan debate, there was this proposal, which was to continue for one further year, not putting taxpayers' money across to social security. It's not taking money away from social security. It's not sophistry, as one member has said. It is that taxpayers have not made that top-up to the Social Security Contribution Fund. And that was in the government plan. There was another proposal in the government plan, which was, in some members' minds, might be seen as being similar, but of course was different. And that was that money would come out of the health insurance fund and be given to the taxpayer pot and divvied up to health. And I think it was the chair of the Health and Social Security panel brought forward an amendment to say that that proposal was inappropriate and it should be stopped. And ministers should not do it anymore. Ministers argued on that day, but this Assembly said, no, that's it, enough is enough. And we are now living rightly with the financial consequences of a decision of this Assembly, and that's how it should work. But there was no amendment to say, no, taxpayers should transfer this money across. And I want to pick up on a point that Deputy Balash made, because I think he made it carefully and it struck a chord with me. He said this legislative amendment shows that ministers hadn't quite weaned themselves off this sort of process. And he's right, of course. That's absolutely right. In that government plan for 2024, ministers have said, no, the transfer from taxpayers to the Social Security Minister and to those benefits payments will take place, and that's just over £80 million. Now, it appears to me that what some members are suggesting now in hindsight is, well, we actually wish that ministers had come back and said that we're going to do it this year rather than waiting for next year. It won't surprise members, I don't think, to see that actually, because of the trajectory of income and spending pressures, ministers proposed a government plan where that was corrected, as had been approved for 2024, and that is in there. It will be, as Deputy Rob Ward said, he could bring an amendment to say to ministers next time, don't do it. But it is currently in the government plan to, in the words of Deputy Balash, finally wean the Assembly off the actions that it's taken over the last couple of years. And I think that is the right thing to do. But the money has been allocated. The money has approvals from this Assembly. And so historically, these sorts of decisions, as you know, sir, are taken directly after the government plan. You've got the finance law changes, and then you have social security law changes. For all sorts of reasons, that wasn't possible in December. But what we will end up having, if members agree, reject what the social security minister is proposing, which is simply a legislative enactment of what they've already agreed in the government plan, what we will have is one piece of legislation saying government should do one thing, and then another piece of legislation in the finance law and the government plan saying that we should do another thing. And so ministers will need to come back to this Assembly, but basically that spending envelope will be short of that £72 million. And then the Assembly will have really two choices at that point. They either use the strategic reserve to cover that spend, which Deputy Barbara Ward was quite clear she would be happy with that. I'm not sure whether Deputy Balash would think that was a good use of the strategic reserve, to spend the strategic reserve on everyday revenue expenditure. Perhaps, sir, he would be more supportive of my view of the world. That would, whether we like it or not, mean that departments would have to cut their budgets and have to cut their spend by that £71 million. And as I stand here, although I might, in political theory, like to see departments cutting their budgets, I don't see any minister putting their hands up right now, or their scrutiny panel supporting them to have their budgets cut. And in fact, the chair of the Health and Social Security scrutiny panel has, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, I think voted against every cut to every budget that's ever been proposed by the Health or the Social Security Department, and he's roundly chastised me and others for even thinking about such a thing. And his party colleagues are stamping their feet in agreement. There is no easy answers to this question. And I'm sorry that there has been this time lag between one decision and now the next decision. And I do understand the frustration of members who've come to this Assembly who want some of these historic decisions to stop. They want the Assembly to be weaned off making them. And I think, certainly from my perspective, the government plan for next year will have this transfer in line with the legislation, and we will be weaned off it. I look to the Chief Minister. I know she is also committed to that weaning off, and she's strongly in favour of reinstating what's known as the supplementation transfer from taxpayers into the fund. And, of course, members have clearly said to ministers, don't ever come back wanting to take money out of the health insurance fund, sorry to my colleague, to give it to the health department, and we won't be doing that either. So I do ask members to remember the decision they made in December. This is simply the secondary implementation of the decision that members have already made to spend this money. They've spent the money. This is how we're spending it. I'm not sure that there's any real mechanism that we can undo that decision by. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputy Ferry.
Sir, if I may, the Attorney General was asked to make a contribution, I believe, by Deputy Balash on the derogation for Article 20, but the absence of derogation for Article 21, 22, and now 23.
So are you asking a question specifically of the Attorney?
The question was, is there any significance in that derogation being absent from the last three, from the 3 years, 21 to 23?
Are you able to assist, Mr. Attorney?
I think I'll need a bit more time. I'm attempting to trace back the relevant history, and so far I haven't tracked it down yet.
Very well. Well, then we'll call upon you perhaps close to the end of the debate, if indeed that's not here yet. Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. And to respond to Deputy Rob Ward's earlier point about Deputy Balash and I having different views on this, of course, any healthy party has different views where they sit down and debate those views before bringing them to the Assembly. And indeed, Deputy Balash and I met on this very matter, and he explained that he had different views to mine. But the reason that I'm confident to vote for this proposition is because this is not monies withdrawn from the fund, as has already been explained. This is monies not being paid into the fund via supplementation. Normal service will be renewed in 2024, and we're confident that that supplementation will continue next year. And of course, we need to remember everyone is focusing on pensions, which of course is very important to people, but the fund doesn't just pay for pensions. The fund pays for people who are unable to work through long-term sickness or short-term sickness. So there are other considerations to be taken into account on this. But the money is needed to pay for COVID support, which was valuable and needed at the time. And I think that where the fund is in a good position, we will know for sure when the actuarial review is released. But there are certainly no early warning signs that give us any cause for concern. So for those reasons, I explained to Deputy Balash that I would be supporting this proposition, and he explained kindly that his reasons for speaking to the contrary. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputies, any other member wish to speak? Deputy Hegarach.
Thank you, sir. March 2020, P31 2020. I voted contra, one of a very few members who voted contra, to not put the money into the Social Security Fund. At that time, I was the chair of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel. P130 2020, I again voted contra to actually again prevent the money going, not to prevent the money going into Social Security. In P90 of 2021, I voted against the government plan. And there lies my problem, sir. I forgot to vote against the government plan in 2022 because I will not be voting for this money not to go in the Social Security Fund. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. There are quite a number of interesting comments there. The first and obvious one I have to respond to is a question of timing. This is simply reopening. We are using what is an unfortunate series of events, which I will explain, to reopen the government plan debate. This should have been debated in December with the rest of the government plan. If someone objected to the transfer, they should have brought an amendment. They didn't. And again, my question to the Attorney-General would be, how does a member open the government plan debate after it has been approved? And what really, I think we all have to ask ourselves what the implications are of doing that, because it puts government in an impossible position of not knowing at any time how much money it has available, because a member can bring a proposition, and I imagine a member does have to bring a proposition to unwind this particular element before not, to allow this not to proceed. This has been agreed. The reason we're debating this now is because the regulations, due to an oversight in my department, were not tabled in time for debate after the government plan debate. I could have asked for them to be debated on short notice, but given the comments made by Deputy Ward, I'm sure others at that time, I decided not to ask for a debate at short notice, but to debate them at an appropriate time without short notice. Had these regulations been tabled sooner, we would have debated them immediately after the government plan in the way we did other pieces of legislation that required to be amended to affect the government plan, and we would not be having this debate now. So this is really a matter of timing, and perhaps in future I will look for short notice. I agree with Deputy Morell. There's some really unfortunate language being used here. The fund is not being robbed, it's not being plundered. We are not taking money out of the fund, we are not putting money into it, and that was what the states, this Assembly agreed in December. There is no profligacy with this fund. I believe that historically, monies went into the fund every year and it was on a pay-as-you-go basis. We put the money in and it was virtually spent every year in paying benefits and pensions. I think either 10 or 20 years ago, a former Social Security Minister increased contributions so that we could build up a reserve fund, a pot to draw on. The Social Security Reserve Fund, as I said, is currently worth 2.1 billion. That gives us a smoothing reserve, if you like, to draw on in terms of need. And this has been, the last 2 or 3 years, has clearly been a time of need. The monies that have come out of here, the monies that have not been contributed, I'm sure has helped pay for vaccines and testing and furlough and all the other things that government did to keep the island operating and to sustain people during a very, very difficult period. That by 2026, we anticipate the Social Security Reserve Fund being £2.4 million. And while we do have that fund, and I think I said earlier that represents 7 years of Social Security pensions and contributions, that would be if we took no more money in. We take money in every year. We are constantly topping up. And we are collecting money that is used to pay pensions and benefits and is still putting money aside for the future. If I could turn first to... Sorry, I will answer one thing. Deputy Ward in her comments was talking about some of our challenges at the moment. The Social Security Fund is currently dealing with some of our existing trials and tribulations, well, our existing work with cost of living. For example, it made a considerable contribution to our response to COVID-19 by ensuring that pensions and benefits continue to be paid, notwithstanding the reduced income that people were receiving. It's paid to reduce, it supported a reduction in employee social security contributions of 2% between October 2020 and June 2021, and again, in fact, in the last quarter of last year. It enabled businesses and the self-employed to defer social security contributions in the first 2 quarters of 2020. So the fund has paid for things that are entirely relevant to be paid by that fund, and it's done so without the grant. To answer the Deputy Ward's questions, I don't believe there is any intention to pay back or to contribute now the funds that have not been paid since 2020 or 2021. There is no money. Where are we going to find £285 million? We've already heard today we have the hospital to build. We've heard Deputy Binet talking this morning about the potentially tens, at least, of millions of pounds we may have to spend on our infrastructure and sewage treatment plants and our wastewater. We simply cannot produce £285 million for that fund. Both Deputy Ward and Deputy Balash have asked about the actual review, and both have asked me if I have seen that report already. I'm quite sure that neither of them intended that question to be offensive, but I am quite offended, because by asking the question, have I seen that review, the implication that I have seen it and have not disclosed it to this House, I do feel is, I am slightly offended by that question. If I had seen a draft report, I can assure you I would have told the States about it. The actual review is continuing right now. I expect to receive the report in draft at the end of March, and as I said during my speech, I'll publish that report as soon as possible. I'm hoping in April, I said the start of Q2, and it will be published as soon as we possibly can in Q2. But I would reiterate again, I have not seen the report, and I have no information that tells me there is a problem with not paying the money into this fund. My confidence, Deputy Balash also asked, on what is my confidence based? My confidence is based on the fact that we have £2.1 billion in reserve, that we are continuing to receive contributions from members of the public, from employers and employees, and that there is no reason to think with our reserves that we cannot continue to pay pensions into the future. Sorry, so I've just lost my train of thought. So the actual report will be coming soon. The actual report will look forward not just to next year, 5 years, 10 years. It will give us a projection of some 60 years, and we'll look at various scenarios, looking at net migration, various scenarios. That will allow us to take any action that we have to do in a proper, sustainable and focused way once we have that report. I think I have addressed all the questions. So, sir, I maintain the principles. Thank you.
Those in favour of... Sorry, Deputy? You up?
Sir, I would like to hear the advice of the
Oh, I
AG.
see. If the Attorney-General is in a position to assist, that's perfectly reasonable in the circumstances. Mr Attorney, are you able to assist?
I believe so, sir. The question was, where are the derogations for 2021 and 2022? And so I believe those derogations may be found in the Amendment number 15 regulations of 2020, which was made by the States on the 17th of December, I think as part of the government plan. And then in the number 16 regulations for the equivalent legislation, which was made by the States on the 17th of December 2022.
So your advice to the Assembly, Mr Attorney, is that there are derogations for the years in question. Very well. Much. The appel is the appel called for? Yes, sir. The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. The vote is on the principles. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The principles have been adopted. 27 votes pour, 16 votes contre, no abstentions.
16, please.
The members voting contre, the Connotab of St Bernard and St Martin, and Deputies Southern, Levegaras, Ward, Owls, Barnum, Mesick, Balash, Coles, Catherine Curtis, Beltham, Howell, Kovac and Barbara Ward.
Deputy Southern, does your panel wish to call this matter in for scrutiny?
No, thank you, sir.
Minister, the Assembly has already agreed to take the regulations as amended. How do you wish to propose them in second reading?
I propose them on block, sir. Please.
Are the regulations seconded en bloc? Does any member wish to speak in second reading? Those in favour of adopting the regulations in second reading kindly show. I think we'll have to take the appel. And I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on second reading, and I ask the greffier to open the voting. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. And I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the regulations are adopted in second reading, 26 votes pour, 15 votes contre, no abstentions. Do you propose the third reading, Minister?
Yes, sir.
Is it seconded in third reading? Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Deputy Oates.
So may I just add to what the Minister said in relation to the funding and from an international perspective, in the third reading, it may be of interest to members to know that the Minister in her earlier remarks spoke about the fund as a fund that is in place for future pensions. It may well be interesting for members to know that in the UK there is no such fund. In other places there is an insufficient fund compared to that. The Minister says that the actuarial review will be carried out, but Jersey stands as one of the most better funded as a pay-as-you-go pension fund with, as she said, the Social Security Minister having made a number of years ago increases in Social Security contributions. And even with this third reading and the Assembly's acceptance of it, our Social Security pension is by far and away better funded than almost any other jurisdiction in the world. And I hope those observations may assist members.
Does any other member wish to speak in third reading? No other member wish to speak in third reading? I close the debate and call on the Minister to respond.
So I think I call for the appel, please.
That is called for. Ask greffier to open the voting. The vote is on the third reading. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I'll ask the greffier to close the voting. The regulations have been adopted in third reading, 28 votes pour, 14 votes contre, no abstentions.
Sir, I wonder if you would allow me to say that neither I nor I am sure Deputy Barbara Ward was suggesting that the Minister had seen the report and not disclosed it. What we were asking was whether she had seen a draft of the report, and if that was misinterpreted, then for my part I certainly regret it.
Well, thank you very much. The next item of public business is the Skills Development Fund P116, lodged by Deputy Andrews of St Helier North, and the main responder is the Minister for Social Security. There's an amendment lodged by the Council of Ministers. Are you accepting that amendment, Deputy? Yes, I am. Yeah. Would you stand up if you answer the chair? Yes, yes, you are.
Yes, I am, sir.
Right, very much. Are members content to take the proposition as amended? Very well. Ask the greffier to read the proposition as amended.
The states are asked to decide whether they are of opinion. A, to agree in principle that a new skills development fund should be created to invest in the upskilling and reskilling of islanders to meet skills gap and human labour needs across the economy. B, to request the Population and Skills Ministerial Group to undertake a review and feasibility study into the establishment of individual lifelong learning accounts to be allocated to all working age residents of Jersey to enable lifelong reskilling and upskilling, and that such a review should establish the feasibility of such accounts, as well as provide options for their operation and their potential sources of funding, with the review being presented to the States Assembly no later than December 2024. C, to request the Minister for Children and Education to engage with the Population and Skills Ministerial Group and other stakeholders and to report back to the Assembly with proposed funding requirements for the Skills Development Fund no later than December 2023, such funding to be included within the Government Plan 2024 to 27, and D, to request the Minister for Treasury and Resources to create the fund no later than January 2024.
Yes, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Now, it was an election pledge that I would actually be looking to address our skill gap and human labour needs within our labour market. And I think, sir, PwC's 2020 report was a very compelling report because it was actually signifying the need to upskill and reskill islanders due to an estimate of 17,000 jobs that will be displaced from the labour market. Therefore, there will be a need for the government to provide an intervention in the market. Now, as it currently stands, Jersey does have a very tight labour market. It means incomes are increasing because there is an undersupply of labour. And therefore, because there is actually a number of vacancies that are made available, that people have the opportunity to migrate into new jobs. However, as a government, we have to be more specific, and we also have to have a directive in terms of how we are going to move forward. We are part of a globalised world. In fact, it's a hyper-globalised world. We also need to ensure that we are investing in our workforce, because our workforce is competing in a global labour market. So what does that mean? It means workforces are going to become more transient. Recruitment drives are going to become more globalised. And it also means when we are going to job interviews, they are going to become more competitive. Therefore, I have to bring this forward, because if we do not act now in anticipation of structural unemployment, what that will mean is there will be job losses within our labour market. Our unemployment rate will increase. And what we also have to realise is if sectors are going to be affected, and we're going to be actually seeing a supply of labour reduce in those sectors, alternative employment will probably end up with wage labour receiving a lower level of income. And we need to think about households and households' private debt obligations, the decisions we take. For instance, it might be the case we decide to invest in our children to go to private school. But what happens when your job is actually replaced through automation? And it's actually affecting the entire sector. So you're not actually able to migrate into a new company where you can still do your job that you're qualified in. It means you're going to be taking a drop in earnings. And therefore, you're most likely going to be in a position of negative savings. And that, again, is going to exacerbate the problem where households' expenditure is going to be in a position where it's going to be maintained. However, the level of savings that you're able to induce beforehand is going to be reduced. And I think it's really important when we are looking at economic productivity, that has to be very much a focus for the next 10 to 15 years. And the reason being is because we need to be generating more output. We want to be seeing our workforce generate more income so they can actually improve their lives. However, one of the concerns that we do have is the weakness for the inducement to invest in Jersey. And it was also something that I mentioned in my proposition. John Maynard Keynes, he mentioned about where private sector surpluses are seen in wealthy communities, the inducement to invest remains weak unless if the interest rate is lowered to reduce investment. And one of the problems that we have here is domestic investment has actually been very much insufficient. And therefore there has been a drive to actually incentivise inward investment into the island. However, one of the issues with inward investment is, in terms of when we're looking at taxable income, that's going to be in other jurisdictions. And I don't think that has actually been something that the Council of Ministers have really articulated is actually one of the weaknesses of inward investment. So, absolutely, the government, by creating a skills development fund, can make sure we are having targeted and allocated funds made available to meet our skill gap needs across the economy. And I think we have to be very prescriptive. We have to ensure we are investing in the right areas. There is no point investing in people where actually that we are going to be generating a lower level of output within our economy. And the reason why I was not too prescriptive with my proposition was because actually there was a risk that potentially it would be knocked back by the Assembly. And in fact, I'm quite pleased to see the Council of Ministers have brought forward an amendment, because actually it means the Assembly is more inclined to actually accept my proposition, and actually we can get the ball rolling. Because it's very important, if we do not act, and if we leave market forces be market forces, we will be seeing a displacement of labour naturally. And of course, it can be said, there will be private sector investment to be creating new jobs. That is most definitely going to happen. However, firms need to be investing in technology as well to ensure they are going to maintain their levels of productivity, and also to even increase their levels of productivity as well, to increase their markups. Because actually what we could be seeing is with technology, there is a lower cost unit price compared to when you're actually paying a unit of labour, for instance. So when we're looking currently at our labour market, and when we look at wage labour and their transfer earnings, because Jersey is a very high cost jurisdiction, it means we are pushing wages up. And therefore firms are having to take decisions in anticipation, because they cannot maintain themselves as is. And actually in the long run, by investing in technology now, you are actually going to see a greater level of savings longer term for the business. And we also have to remember we need to be increasing not only aggregate supply of wage labour, so the number of headcount within our labour market, but we also have to have a level of specialisation in terms of trade, making sure that we can actually be very proud of our workforce, because we are investing in our people. And it's something that we have not really focused on enough, I don't think. Because when we are looking at specialisation, we are looking at people having a higher level of income. And actually that is how people are actually going to see collective upward social mobility. Because one of the other problems is we've not actually seen high growth industries be established in Jersey. And that is something that we are going to have to address as a legislature. And it means we might have to be looking at in terms of our immigration rules as well. Maybe offering a bit more flexibility by bringing in the right people who can actually establish those sectors, but also to ensure that we are investing in people in those sectors as well to actually generate domestic output. And it was also mentioned within my proposition that we should not be scared for people domestically to be working for foreign firms, because the world is becoming more transient. And it means, for instance, firms might have a labour force where there are 5 or 6 different nationalities working in different countries for them. Because again, we want to be enhancing the level of specialisation that can be made available for domestic firms. But also it gives islanders the opportunity to have wider scope to be working for foreign firms as well, to build on their experience, to build on their skills, and to actually better their lives. And Anthony Giddens, who's actually a sociologist and who, has been very influential, I think, in terms of where I stand politically, he mentioned the need to have collective upward social mobility. And it's something that New Labour really tried to establish as well. And I think they did a very, very good job. They actually reduced the unemployment rate. And that is something that I'm intending to do as well by doing this. Because if we do not have any intervention, then what we could potentially be seeing is more people will be on transfer payments, it will be a cost to the government, and instead the government could be doing this, it could be investing in people and redeploying them elsewhere within the labour market to actually maintain an aggregate level of supply in terms of wage labour within the labour market, but also to maintain aggregate demand as well. So I am looking forward to hearing the views of members, sir. So thank you.
Proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I'm fully behind the development of a skills fund. It's one of the main recommendations from the Future Further Education and Skills Actionable Agenda, which I actually published on the 20th of December 22, the day after Deputy Andrews launched this proposition. As Deputy Andrews mentioned to all of us, difficulties in recruitment, deficits in skills, technological changes create challenges to our economic ecosystem. Automation, robotization, digitalization will cause many jobs to be replaced by others, as it has been identified. We as my department in Skill Jersey, had the engagement with Jersey Employment Group, and from academic report and from the feedback that we received, it's clear that analytical thinking, active learning, proficiency in new technology, creativity, originality and initiative, critical thinking, persuasion and negotiation, attention to details, resilience, flexibility and complex problem solving, emotional intelligence, leadership and social influence, as well as service orientations, will be gaining demand in the future. Through the education from early years, through the whole system, we would look into developing these necessary skills for the future. And I'm grateful for Deputy Andrews for working with us and accepting our amendment, because it's so important that we all stand behind and say we do need to invest in skills. It's the future of our economy. The actionable agenda for further education states that although previous skills-related strategy were produced to ensure delivery against strategic intent, the money never been found. It's always kind of pushed aside because the funds were not available there, even though the skills were so clear, important 4 years ago and 10 years ago. I looked really, really back. So the establishment of the Skills Fund will allow us economic prosperity and underwriting social equity. The Skills Fund will allow Jersey to draw upon the best international practice and lessons learned on the island from the Fiscal Stimulus Fund. So, for example, we did have Fiscal Stimulus Fund, and we used it in retraining through the Highlands, some through Digital Jersey, very important skills. And we can provide a foundation of a permanent Jersey Skills Fund, enabling systemic approach to taking in skilling, reskilling, upskilling Jersey workforce, and working with different providers. So I'm really pleased to work with Deputy Andrews, indeed with Annie and all backbenchers, to achieve a lot more when we collaborate towards our common goals. We discussed at the Council of Ministers amendment, and as Deputy mentioned in his speech, he did want to be prescriptive. And what really was important for us to allow flexibility when we are developing the system, when we are developing this fund, to make sure that we are considering all options. So, for example, what was changed, that I understand that logically, Skills Jersey is the right place, but it might be not. So we need, it might be Skills Jersey, but it might be found something else. What's really important for us is to check all options before we are establishing, to make sure that everything is checked. And this was one of the amendments to the proposition, that it just allow this flexibility. Also, the proposition assigned responsibility, stakeholder engagement, and reporting back to the states as separate to the Minister of Social Security, and ultimately we have Skills Jersey under my portfolio, and ultimately Chief Minister is responsible for creating Population and Skills Ministerial Group. And this is how we work collaboratively, because we need to understand the needs and work across the department. And this is the second amendment that was put in place. I'm fully supportive of Deputy Andrews' proposed timing for the formulation of the Skills Fund, as this aligned also with my intention to progress with this work for the inclusion in the proposed government plan, future government plan 24-27. And as Population and Skills Ministerial Group, we have instructed officers already to identify sources of funding and options for the operation and governance of a fund for initial establishment in 24. As we all know, the fast change in labour market required lots of flexibility and model reskilling and upskilling of the workforce. As a SIPES, as a skills jersey under my, and I cannot say the Minister for Economic Development, which is responsible for the economy and future economy. We worked a lot in day-to-day with Deputy Moreau, which I'm really, really grateful and absolutely supportive of the long life learning and which he raised during the election, and feasibility into establishing individual long life learning accounts. And finally, I think the role of government investment is important, as well as public-private partnerships and corporate social responsibility in upskilling and reskilling. This fund will allow us to develop courses and programs needed to support Jersey economy in the future and implementing lifelong learning as a regular activity throughout everyone's career. As Deputy Andrews said, let's get the ball rolling and please support the establishment of the Skills Development Fund. Thank you.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. There's absolutely no doubt that skills need to be supported. There's been, and the development skills need to be supported. There's been so many reports saying that much, including more recently published Further Education and Skills Actionable Agenda for a Prosperous, Productive and Fair Jersey, published 20th December 2022. There was the Economic Council report, there's been an innovation report, and the same thing is said again and again. So whilst I can't commend the Deputy for trying to taking this step, as he describes it, in terms of trying to improve the economy, I have a concern that how it's actually presented as actually doing something positive, constructive, could be a little misleading, because we're talking about a fund that I don't understand has got anything in it yet, in terms of like how much money is going in this fund. How is it going to be distributed? How is it going to be allocated? Because what there is, and indeed the Further Education and Skills Actionable Agenda, notice it says actionable rather than action, agenda actually points out is that an actual idea needs to be created as to what skills are going to be supported. There's been this mention of attracting inward investment and high growth industry. Well, that's great, but if we do, how will they be skilled? So I do question about this whole thing about getting your ducks in a row. And more importantly, there seems to be a pattern here of kind of people pulling out pieces like of a jigsaw and saying this is actually what's going to actually achieve this result, when nobody actually really sees the picture on the box. And actually, here's another piece of the jigsaw, and here's another piece of the jigsaw. And for all we know, there are so many pieces of the jigsaw, they won't fit in the box. So, whilst I commend the intentions here, I have to confess that I really would like to be hearing a little bit more about actual delivery, about some of the things that need to be resolved that even are mentioned in these reports, things like the coordination, the way in which industry, even now, which has a skill shortage, and therefore there are competitions in demand for skilled labour, how is that going to be resolved? And attract inward investment and skill it. And what about the ageing population? I mean, these accounts, is it just for the people up to 19? Is it for people up to 25? Is it for people up to 70? There are some really fundamental questions here. I'd like to hear a bit more in terms of the answers. And if it is people that's up to 70, How do we square all that with the amount of, we talk about supporting employees, then there's the self-employed. What's really interesting is how many business licenses are granted to people to set up businesses without any requirement for actual qualifications in terms of specific skills. So there's a whole kind of culture of wanting skills, seeking them, that we need to encourage them, and as well as respecting them. So if this is a first step, I'd actually say it's a baby step, and it's a baby step in the dark. So for that reason, and I'm sorry to see Deputy Andrews shake his head at me, I'm personally rather tired of tick box exercises and promises that aren't delivered to the population. I would like to see much more in the way of specifics first. Thank you.
Deputy Hull.
Thank you, sir. Following Deputy Scott, I would just like to say that I'm quite happy with the baby step to start. We've got to start somewhere, and we've got a lot of people on the island, and if we can help any of them to improve their skills in whatever area it is, then I think that's a good thing, sir. And I will be supporting Deputy Andrews and the Minister for Education and Children in this matter, sir. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy. Is there any other? Deputy Joseph.
So I would like to commend Deputy Andrews and the Education Minister for bringing, amending the proposition. When we look from an international perspective, is what Deputy Andrews said, we're looking at an increasingly global world. In my answer to Deputy Andrews' question earlier about trade deals, he's quite right that we're looking at a world in which trade in services, financial services, is becoming increasingly globalised. He's quite right when he says that we're looking at a world in which the fast foot, nimble services world can be fleet of foot and can be domiciled elsewhere in a world which I didn't recognise until I came back in office, can be done in terms of Teams meetings. We can have financial, professional business services being carried out in other places. And our workforce here is going to be having to equip themselves for an increasingly globalised world. And I was looking at the proposition by the Education Minister and looking at the three examples that she cited from Singapore, France and the Netherlands. And I would say respectfully to the chair of the Economic Affairs Scrutiny Panel that actually this is an adult step. And I'm sorry if I've basically said it's Deputy Morell. We have a council of United Ministers here in relation to that. I apologise if it's Deputy Morell's area. It's he's that's doing this, but we all are singing from the same hymn sheet here. What effectively we are seeing is not effectively a baby step. It's an adult step. It's a step to putting in place a skill account, which the ministers are accepting and going to bring forward of how it's funded. The right way of doing propositions in the Assembly is how the Deputy's done it, I would argue, sir. He's brought forward a manifesto commitment. He's done that. He was elected on that basis. He's asked for the Council of Ministers to project it, to look at it. It's been amended by the Council of Ministers. We've got then other ideas to do that. And if we look at the international precedents of Singapore, the French fund, we can see that they're working. They're having money put aside, individuals to working for their future, to deal with not just the vaccine of an A-level or a degree, which is not simply going to be the vaccine or the education that's going to be sufficient for their working lives ahead. It's about continual improvement. And this skills fund will allow that to happen, subject to funding and subject to individuals actually wanting to contribute in it to themselves. So I would say in closing, sir, we have an important visitor to Jersey tomorrow. We have the Estonian ambassador. And that is a small country that has made huge advantages in the digital area. They've got EID, they've got all sorts of exciting initiatives which have taken their economy, and as somebody who studied European economics before the widening of the European Union, it is great to see the European Union, as it is now, with equal membership of countries like Estonia and Lithuania, who have advanced themselves from being Soviet countries with effectively a communist Comecon-style economy into free market and open. And Estonia has a lot to be credited for what they're doing, and we have a lot to learn from Estonia. And I wonder whether or not, and I'll look it up before the ambassador comes tomorrow, we have our numerous meetings with him. We've got workforce meetings with him. We're looking at digital health for the health minister. We're looking at skills. We're looking at tech with Deputy Curtis and other areas. And we're doing all of these areas, and we can learn from other countries. We can learn from other countries, and we can skill ourselves, as the Deputy said, social mobility. Upward incomes all the way forward, and we can draw from the experience of other countries, and this proposition is not a baby step, it's a big adult step, and it's going to make a difference, and I fully support it.
Very much. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure it is an unintended omission by Deputy Joseph, but we also have another important visitor tomorrow, and that's former Chief Minister of Guernsey, who's coming, and I'm sure there's a lot we can learn from there as well. But I just wanted to say, and I wanted to thank Deputy Andrews for bringing his proposition. It's, until I heard, and maybe I would remember it, till I heard Deputy Joseph's speech, I'd forgotten it was a manifesto commitment and of Deputy Andrews, and it's enabled me to also add my own manifesto commitment, which is the lifelong learning accounts, into it as well, which is fantastic, and with the agreement of the Council of Ministers, obviously. The way I see skills funding, in fact, if I go back to writing that manifesto back over Christmas and earlier this year, the skills, we have a massive skills conundrum ahead of us, sir. And that is, we know that we need to have a flexible workforce that is fleet of foot and fleet of mind and able to learn new skills throughout the whole of our working lives. Indeed, I've just been speaking to Deputy Barbara Ward about older people working and kind of trying to encourage older people to work as well, and how important that is. But obviously, to have new jobs at different parts in our lives will require us to learn different skills and new skills. And where perhaps I slightly differ from Deputy Andrews is that I don't believe the government can fund that. I believe with approximately 60,000 workers in the island over the course of their, let's say, 40 to 50 years of working life, to try and fund directly from central government that skills, changing, upskilling, downskilling, etc., is just going to be too onerous or too expensive. Not even onerous, it'll be too expensive, sir. So in my mind, I think there is a place for skills fund, and that perhaps is more focused on those really essential skills. And we know today in Jersey, we lack nursing skills, we lack teaching skills, we lack social work skills, and there are plenty of other skills that, from a public service perspective, we lack. And I can imagine the skills fund being focused on perhaps those areas. And even in the private economy, perhaps if we have some really key areas that are lacking that we know we need, then perhaps it can be used as that. But then the idea of lifelong individual learning accounts is very much to provide every working citizen with the freedom to have the money to choose the training that they want for the next stage in their careers, whichever direction that is. Because not everything that we want to do as individuals will be the same as what the government would like us to do as individuals. And so, but at the same time, we should have that freedom to move. That's what creates an innovative and exciting economy, the ability for individuals to think up new ideas and to follow new paths. That's what will make this island economy exciting in the future, sir. And so that's where the thinking behind at least a feasibility study into lifelong learning accounts comes from. And Deputy O's is absolutely right to cite in that report Singapore and France and others who are already doing it. And the idea, sir, is really to take the burden of funding away from government, because alongside healthcare funding, pension funding, education funding, the calls on government funding are large and will only get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so this is an attempt to try and find a way to both provide that direct government funding where it's needed, but also find a way to fund individuals, not from central government finances, but in a way that enables them to live free, entirely autonomous lives that they are empowered to live and can choose the directions that they want to go in, sir. So I really do hope that the Chamber and the Assembly will support both Deputy Andrews and the Council of Ministers and myself by supporting this proposition and allowing us to get on with what I think is absolutely essential work. Thank you, sir.
Much Deputy Rob Ward.
Thanks, sir. It's quite happy to support this. I will say a couple of things. There is in the delivery plans and MC3P 6.3 on page 27, there is a commitment which is very similar. I'd just like to ask to bring out a proposition what would be different. So there's already some plans to do this, which is very interesting, including the date, December 2024, for a development fund to be set up. So just to make that point. But I'd like to go back a little bit, because there is a further education skills actionable agenda quoted in the report for this, in the amendment. And you see, this is great to have lifelong learning. It's very important. I will also say that many private businesses do this. They certainly do it in finance, and a number of people have done exams in finance that are funded. They do it in hospitality with certain training across the piece. So that does happen already. However, this isn't going to work unless we address the structural problems that we have in our education system that have existed for years and years and years. And I hate to upset Deputy Scott, but here comes the soapbox again, because it's a really important one. I quote from the report that was published. The independent review of school funding also concluded that 16 to 18-year-olds at Highlands College receive less per capita funding than the same age group in schools, including Holier. This has been a clear implication for the regard in which vocational education is held compared to academic provision, and is deeply unfair given overall level of disadvantage among students at the college. That inequality in the value given to vocational funding is endemic in our education system, and it will be endemic in an education system that is so actively selective. And unless those fundamental issues are addressed, we will be just skirting around the edges of training and lifelong education. And that must be addressed in these issues. Highlands College cannot be left to simply deal with all of this, and particularly given that the buildings that it has are wholly inadequate for the remarkable things that it does. I saw plans for a new college years ago. It never happened. And unless, and I would suggest, we have a genuine post-16 provision on this island and a post-16 campus that will deliver for Jersey, we will always struggle to deliver lifelong learning in the way that we want to. And that's one of the most important things as we enter into this process. And of course, we can support this, but those fundamental underlying issues have to be addressed. The UK has attempted to do it, sir, with things like T-levels. Now, T-levels won't necessarily, which are basically vocational A-levels. They're a European-style education system that gives real value to vocation and realises that false division between vocational and academic education doesn't work. It simply doesn't work in a modern economy or in a modern system, be it through IT, engineering, nursing, medicine, all areas of our economy. But we are not addressing that. And so what I would like to see is this lifelong learning package, which is, if you like, a right to access to lifelong learning, which is a really good idea, and we have to do it because we all will retrain, has to be accompanied by the right resourcing to do it. And that's not simply a fund that says, here, you can get a grant for £1,000 to go and do an IT course with one of the providers, but you've got to find one. We have to have the access to the facilities that are there. And what we can't do is our one post-16 college on the island cannot be constantly bombarded with more demands. Highlands College deals with children from young people from 14, some of the most challenging children from 14, and they are asked to deal with them. They're trying to do that at the same time as deliver education for those throughout their ages, into the evenings. They have to find staff, they have to find lecturers, they have to find accommodation. But if you're using it for one thing, you can't use it for another. And so that massive inadequacy of our provision has to be addressed. Otherwise, and there's been an enormous number of buzzwords here. I was thrown back. I was given a revisit to the digital fund where there was that lovely, I was expecting to see a Venn diagram with all these words in that we could just make up phrases from. It did sound a little bit like that. And I would make a plea to finish with, please don't overcomplicate this. It has to be kept simple. From the beginning you start education on this island, there needs to be clear access and pathways for everybody on this island that is not simply determined on whether they can pay. And then throughout their lives, there needs to be options in genuine facilities that allow that and do not ask. And this is what I would say to the Education Minister. The problem that we have here, that children are made to make false choices at the age of 14, which lead them into paths which they don't necessarily want and don't necessarily work for this island. And why we've still got that in place, that will be a barrier to this sort of lifelong learning and the genuine development of skills on this island. So yes, of course we can support this. I don't think it's particularly different from what's in the development plans that have already been published or recently published in October or whenever they were. But yeah, go with it, but let's deal with the structural problems first, because if you don't, it's not going to work, sir. It's simply not going to work. We'll just end up with another fund that, that we've seen so many of. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy Alex Curtis.
Sir, thank you to Deputy Morell for his comments, and actually really thank you to Deputy Rob Ward for his comments just now. I'd like to take a little different tack on this one. It might sound cynical, given so much of the conversation so far has been actually the emergence of the requirement for digital skills. But I really want to ask, why do we need this fund? Why is this the right way of achieving digital upskilling and reskilling? It's still not yet clear to me what a dedicated fund achieves to further that ambition. What does the Deputy see this fund investing in? Is it investing in skills and delivery methods? Is it looking to fund classes on topics? Is the fund actually to invest in the infrastructure of schools, in buildings, hardware, and some of the logistics around that? Or is it looking to fund individuals' times off from work for training? The reason this is quite confusing to me when we highlight the emergence of digital skills requirement is I feel a little well qualified or somewhat qualified to speak on this area, having both delivered digital training and consumed a large amount of it. And the thing that's really interesting is there is an amazing amount of digital education out there that is free in various formats to pursue any number of career paths, not just in digital. That could be anything, though, from program management down to the core technical areas of data science or software engineering. And not only are there the skills, there has never been so much access to the content and communities looking to learn together for free. And it's so easy for us to throw money at a pool and say, we're going to fund the education of skills. Because really, I think we've got to tap into the second part here, which is a culture of skills education and the culture of growing and reskilling yourself. I know that the Deputy has been keen to ask government, what will we be doing, or what will the government be doing to help reskill the people whose jobs are now being threatened on a 10-year horizon because of digital automation, to ensure they maintain the same wage bracket? So I put myself in the seat of someone who might be threatened with a 10-year, 15-year vulnerability that their job will be automated. What would I do? Well, I'd invest my time in reskilling. I don't think there is a structural restriction on the cost of that education. Time might be, but actually I'm very well aware that there is so much education out there, but you have to have a culture of wanting that. As an individual, you have to be proactive in being ready to take on the new education and the new skills you want. In my own education so far, and it's shorter than most people, I think, in this assembly. I think I'd say that skills growth is my #1 hobby. That's practical things from welding to, poorly doing plastering, but to my day job, which is digital. And I've done so much of that. I've attended courses, I have sessions, but the truth is so much of my learning has come from more modern approaches. It's actually come from learning on the job with a respectful and investing in employer. And it's come from taking communities and working with them, presenting it at shows, and really investing in projects that allow me to develop. So I love learning. I want the island to share my love of learning outside of their working hours, in their weekends. That's how I work, because I love growth of skills. And I believe we need a really relevantly skilled workforce and a digitally mature workforce. My question still remains, is this fund, or is a fund the correct vehicle to do so? I will ask in closing if the Deputy could say if he's looking to take his proposition in part, but I support the ambition for a culture on island that we invest day in, day out in our own skills and how we better ourselves.
Sir, point of clarification, please, sir.
Will you give way for a point of clarification?
Certainly.
Yes, I was just wondering if Deputy could clarify that his day job is as States Member and Assistant Minister rather than digital, as he maintains.
I was going to say regrettably so. Not quite. I clarify that is my job, but I feel under delegated portfolio from the Chief Minister as Assistant Chief Minister, remaining skilled in digital is a key priority of mine.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak? Deputy Wilson.
Thank you. I'd like to support this proposition for some of the reasons that I alluded to before in relation to the issues of workforce supply that face the health service. But I also want to take note of the comments that Deputy Scott made in relation to baby steps. And I have to say I disagree with her approach to that. I mean, we've got to signal big vision, big strides, big steps, to give people hope, to give people chances, life chances, so that they can actually position themselves in society to make a meaningful contribution. And I think Deputy Andrews' proposition goes some way to doing that. The detail of how that works can be worked out, but the principle behind it is absolutely critical. The nature of work is changing. It's changing beyond recognition, and we cannot afford to take baby steps. We've actually got to be ahead of the game, constantly searching ways to actually give people opportunity for development and support. And I think that if we as a country, if we as an island invest in making that commitment to our islanders, we will be signalling to them that we value the contribution that they can make as a member of society with a whole range of skills, not only that will benefit islanders, but also are transportable across the world. Thank you.
Very much. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to respond to some of the points made by previous speakers in my role as Assistant Minister for Education. And Deputy Rob Ward made some really important points around equity and access to education. And we've heard those and noted them, and some of them indeed we have raised before with our officers, and work is starting on some of the points to address them. So I can help the Assembly and inform members that work is underway to allow the funding to follow the learner. So for 16 to 19-year-olds, no matter where the learner is and what type of education they choose, the funding would be there to support their choices. And we'd be extending that even further for those with special educational needs, and that would be there for up to age 25. And indeed, additional funding has already been given to Highlands. The Deputy mentioned Highlands specifically. The Minister and I went on a tour of Highlands recently. We were extremely impressed with the education offered, but we also note that some further support is needed in terms of the building and the buildings and the provision there for the students. And we really value the provision there, and we value the efforts that the students there are making to improve their own skills and further their own ambitions. So £300,000 of extra funding, I think, has already been given to Highlands as part of the funding review. And we are also looking into, and it is our intention to increase funded education. At the moment, it's only up to age 16, fully funded education in Jersey, and we want to increase that up to age 18, possibly 19, I think. So I hope that helps the Assembly, and I thank members for their suggestions and things that we are hearing them, and we will note those.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak on the proposition? I close the debate and call upon Deputy Andrews to respond.
Thank you, sir. I'd just like to correct Deputy Morell, who mentioned about our workforce being 60,000 strong. Really, what I'm looking at here is where private investment is actually not forthcoming, where there's a shortfall of private sector investment, then the government needs to step in. So essentially, if we're looking at, for instance, there are parties who are going to be registering themselves with Social Security, then that would be the opportunity for the Skills Development Fund to actually be in appropriate use. Otherwise, we'd probably be in a fiscal deficit, I think, if that was the case with 60,000 people. So I thought that was just important to clarify. Also, Deputy Alex Curtis, who again has a a background in digital skilling. There's quite a lot of emphasis in his speech about digital skills. However, we need to be thinking more broadly. It's not just about digital. We have an entire economy to think about here. There are numerous sectors that really will need to see more labour be deployed in those areas in the future to actually generate additional output. And I also have to say, with Deputy Gardner, she articulated her views very well, I think, and so did Deputy Dublé, in terms of making sure there is an integration with school leavers from, say, 16 to 19 years of age, giving our young people the opportunity to actually find a career path that they can actually enter into. However, we shouldn't be too fixated in terms of actually maintaining people in careers. We also have to acknowledge that people might see a migration at some point in time when they are maybe slightly older. And that is really the purpose of this fund. It's based upon upskilling in terms of when we're looking at those who are entering the labour market, but also the opportunity to reskill the workforce as well. And I think the component of reskilling is going to probably become more predominant as we see the private sector in particular investing in technology, because that is when we are going to start to see labour displacement. And it's quite important to also mention, when we're looking at international organisations, when you're looking at the World Economic Forum, they are very much ahead of the game. And the skill sets that our labour market will need absolutely will be different compared to the skill sets that are at the moment in place. For instance, when you're looking at being analytical, being creative, being innovative, those are words that will be bandied around, as often is the case. However, there will absolutely be a demand for those skill sets in the future, because that is how the labour market is transforming. And we need to ensure that we are going to remain competitive alongside everybody else. I also was quite pleased with Deputy Morell, who, again, I remember seeing in the election his manifesto, and I thought it was a very good manifesto, and also the component in relation to skills. Because we have to remember there will be a stage in our lives where maybe we cannot continue doing some of the practical jobs that we were once able to do. And therefore, it's appropriate, I feel, to actually invest in those people, to actually give them the opportunity to migrate into other areas within the labour market. And we have to also understand, without the establishment of sectors within the future that are going to be high growth sectors, what we could be seeing is there be Jersey's low wage economy that we are going to be very much depending on. However, those personal incomes are going to be relatively low, and the quality of life is not going to be there compared to other jurisdictions. So it's quite important that we, as a legislature, are trying to induce private capital investment. So actually, companies will be investing in their workforces, and I think the government will have a second line of defence where, if there are shortfalls in private sector investment, then the government can step in, and this is where we can see the Skills Development Fund come into use. And I think that is really important. So there will be natural changes within the market. Firms will decide on the decisions that they take in terms of how to be more productive. That means they might be reducing their wage labour supply in terms of the amount of people that they employ, and in place will be technology. However, the benefits will be with the creation of new jobs, modern jobs, and especially in tertiary-based education. This is really where we are going to be seeing islanders be on higher incomes. And I think tertiary-based education is vital to our island, because if you're looking at, say, the secondary sector in terms of like in terms of, say, I don't know, factories, for instance, that's where you're going to be seeing wage labour be on lower incomes. Whereas if you're looking at, say, tertiary-based services, this is actually where you're going to be seeing deciles receive higher incomes. And also as well, that will reduce the dependency on the government as well in terms of the transfer payments that are being incurred, because the government is having to actually subsidise wage labour at the moment, because there is very much an abundant low-wage economy workforce that we do have. And I think we really need to try and reduce that number. We also need to give people the opportunity, however, to make those big steps up the ladder. I know Deputy Scott mentioned about making baby steps. However, she didn't actually bring forward this proposition, and I think there are many people who do support this proposition because they do see there being a need to invest in the upskilling and reskilling of islanders, and I think such archaic views are probably reasons why Jersey is currently in the position it is in, because there have not been any forthcoming plans to address the problems that we face in terms of structural unemployment. And structural unemployment is actually going to be a very big issue. And if governments don't react and don't take a proactive approach, then of course there could be some problems in the future. So by taking decisions now, by actually becoming more prescriptive, and that's what the executive government are going to do, the Council of Ministers, they're going to come back and they are going to provide us with contingencies. And I have to say I am fully behind whatever the Council of Ministers come up with, because I think it's very important that we are working as a collaborative legislature, and we have to ensure that islanders are prioritised, because if we do not prioritise the upskilling and reskilling now, it could become too late and actually more costly longer term. So I will call for the appel. So,
Thank you very much. The bill is called for. I invite members to return to their seats.
So, point of clarification, are we voting on block on all parts of the proposition?
It's a matter for the deputy. He's not indicated he wishes to vote on separate parts. Therefore, the vote is normally taken as a whole.
Yeah, just one vote, sir. Yeah.
If members are ready to vote, I ask the referee to open the voting and members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the referee to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 38 votes pour, 3 votes contre, no abstentions. Well, the next item is the Draft Limited Liability Companies Amendment Jersey Regulations, P118, lodged by the Minister for External Relations and Financial Services. The respondent is the Chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the referee to read the citation.
Draft Limited Liability Companies Amendment Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Articles 2A and 62K of the Limited Liability Companies Jersey Law 2018.
So Deputy Miller is going to be...
Deputy Miller. Yes, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. The draft Limited Liability Companies Amendment Jersey regulations seek to introduce the option for those establishing a limited liability company, which I'll for now refer to as LLC, to be designated as a body corporate at the time of its registration. Under the current Limited Liability Companies Law 2018, an LLC has separate legal personality but is not a body corporate. The Limited Liability Companies Amendment Number 2 Jersey Law 2022 added Article 2A to the law, granting the States Assembly the authority to amend the law by regulations permitting the registration of an LLC as a body corporate. The amendments to the law will enable those registering an LLC to designate it as either a body corporate or a not body corporate, but having separate legal personality in either case. This election may be made only once and only at the time of registration. The law, as enacted, was intended to create an internationally recognised vehicle or corporate structure that is widely used by fund managers globally, particularly in the US. The most popular vehicle of choice for US fund managers is the Delaware LLC because of the flexibility it affords members in how its operations are structured. When a US fund manager seeks to raise investment from outside the US, it's necessary to keep offshore investment monies in a separate vehicle from monies raised onshore in the US. By creating a Jersey LLC, that replicates the functional characteristics of the Delaware LLC, which means that the Jersey offering will be readily understood by US fund managers and courts as to its operation and features. It's precisely this familiarity of form that makes the Jersey LLC an alternative option, an attractive option for US fund managers. The amendment further enhances the flexibility of the Jersey LLC for such US fund managers by giving them the option of the form they wish the LLC to take. This ability to make such an election between the two forms is unique and affords Jersey a competitive advantage over other LLC offerings, such as that of the Cayman Islands, which specifies that an LLC can only be a body corporate. The Cayman LLC, in fact, has proved very popular with US fund managers since its enactment in 2016, and over 3,500 have been registered to date. The Jersey LLC vehicle, with its enhanced flexibility, is expected to prove equally, if not more, popular. With its additional flexibility, combined with Jersey's excellent reputation for the quality and stability of its legal system and judiciary, the availability of such a vehicle will help drive economic growth and job creation within the island's legal and financial services sectors, further enhancing Jersey's standing as a leading international centre for financial services. An LLC working group comprising respected representatives from across industry has met on a regular basis for some time to consider how to distinguish the Jersey LLC vehicle in order to enhance its appeal. The proposals have also been the subject of a public consultation. Registration of an LLC as a body corporate will be restricted to vehicles marketed to sophisticated investors where the majority of activity of the fund occurs outside Jersey. The FSC will not allow local businesses to use the vehicle for what should otherwise be Jersey limited companies to avoid what we call regulatory arbitrage. Revenue Jersey has confirmed that for domestic tax purposes, LLCs of either form will be treated identically. There are no manpower or cost implications for the states. The law has been referred to the Law Officers Department, who consider the law to be compatible with the human rights law. Sir, I propose the principles. Thank you.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? Those in favour of adopting the principles kindly show. Those against? Principles are adopted. Does the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel wish to scrutinise the matter, Deputy Scott?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. How do you wish to deal with the matter in second reading?
May I propose regulations en bloc, sir, please?
Are they seconded en bloc? Yes. Does any member wish to speak on the regulations in second reading, or any of them? Those in favour of adopting the regulations in second reading kindly show. Those against? Do you propose in third reading, Minister?
Yes, please, sir.
Are the regulations seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Deputy Scott.
Sir, just to say that I am disappointed that some members aren't supporting this law, which is actually supporting our own finance industry, which, as I have said, sorry, then I actually saw. Sorry? Okay. I may have made a mistake, sir. I thought some people weren't supporting the proposition, so didn't want to explain why it's
We normally
important.
take a standing vote, Deputy, if it seems to be uncontentious.
Thank you.
Not everybody makes it to their feet, but I just assume there's been a significantly substantial amount of support that the appeal is not needed. But very well. There's no recorded vote, so it's impossible to say whether people who are not sitting either didn't make it in time, were too tired to get up to their feet, were abstaining. We just can't tell. So it's a various possibilities. Very well. Does any other member wish to speak in third reading? Given the Deputy stopped speaking, I'm not going to call upon you unless... very well. Is the appel called for?
Yes, please, sir.
The appel is called for. Invite members to return to their seats. The vote is adoption of the Limited Liability Companies Amendment Jersey Regulations in third reading. I ask the Referee to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the Referee to close the voting. The regulations have been adopted in third reading of 41 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions. Very well. The next item of public business is the draft limited liability companies winding up and dissolution amendment, Jersey Regulations B119, lodged by the same minister with the same responder, and I ask the Referee to read the citation.
Draft Limited Liability Companies Winding Up and Dissolution Amendment Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Article 60 of the Limited Liability Companies Jersey Law 2018.
Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the draft Limited Liability Companies Winding Up and Dissolution Amendment Jersey Regulations seek to propose a number of revisions to the existing provisions dealing with the winding up of an LLC, the vehicle we've just been discussing. Since the commencement of the existing winding up regulations, amendments have been made to the company's Jersey Law 1991. These amendments created a remedy available to a creditor of an insolvent Jersey company by permitting a creditor to apply to the court for the company to be wound up and for a liquidator to be appointed to conduct that winding up. The liquidator must be listed on the approved list of liquidators maintained by the Viscount. The company's law was amended to ensure that it continues to provide appropriate solutions to those acting within its framework domestically and internationally, recognising the interests of creditors while also providing appropriate protections for the debtor company. The amendments were the result of work with industry representatives and public consultation. The new procedure used established concepts and processes from within Jersey and also in other jurisdictions, so that being based on tried and tested concepts and procedures already familiar to practitioners, it would be widely understood. And I think, sir, it's also been the new procedure has been generally welcomed by industry. Other existing remedies, such as Des Astres, remain available. The current LLC winding up regulations are largely based on the winding up provisions within the company's law as existed prior to the recent amendments, and it's seen as appropriate for changes reflecting the amendments. It's seen as appropriate that the changes that were made to the company's law are also now made to the LLC winding up regulations, so that this remedy is also available for a creditor of an LLC. Therefore, the proposed amendments before you today, for the most part, mirror the changes made to the company's law, subject to the necessary adjustments where necessary to cater for the particular nature of an LLC, for example, that there is a manager and not a director. Sir, I propose the principles.
Principle seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? All those in favour of adopting the principles, kindly show. Those against? Principles are adopted. Deputy Scott, does your panel wish to call the matter in?
No, sir.
How do you wish to propose in second reading, Minister?
I'd like to propose the regulations en bloc, please, sir.
Are the regulations seconded en bloc in second reading? Does any member wish to speak in second reading? Those in favour of adopting the regulations in second reading, kindly show. Those against? Regulations are adopted in second reading. Do you propose in third reading, Minister?
Yes, sir, please.
Are they seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Is the appel called for?
Yes, please, sir.
Very well. No point in inviting members to return to their seats. I therefore ask Referee to open the voting. Members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask Referee to close the voting. And the regulations have been adopted in third reading, 40 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions. Very well. The next item of public business is the draft Public Holidays and Bank Holidays Amendment, Coronation Jersey Act P1, lodged by the Chief Minister. The main respondent will be the Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. I ask the Referee to read the citation.
Draft Public Holidays and Bank Holidays Amendment Coronation Jersey Act 2000, the states make this act under Article 2 of the Public Holidays and Bank Holidays Jersey Law 1951.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. This draft act, if approved, will provide for a public holiday on Monday, the 8th of May of this year, to mark the coronation of our head of state, King Charles III. The UK government announced plans for a bank holiday back in November of last year, which will be observed across Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Our fellow Crown dependencies have mirrored this arrangement, and I feel it's entirely appropriate for the Bailiwick of Jersey to similarly observe a public holiday on this very special occasion. This will ensure that the King's coronation is observed in the same manner across the British Isles and will allow islanders to mark the occasion in whichever way they so choose. Official plans to celebrate the coronation are being developed, led by your chambers, sir, and I know that the parishes will hold their own events as well, which we all very much look forward to. As members will know, the coronation of King Charles III is on the 6th of May. By providing for a public holiday on the 8th of May, islanders will be afforded an extended weekend to mark this significant and historic event as they feel appropriate, leading into our own national celebrations on Liberation Day. Before bringing this draft act to the Assembly, I've consulted with the Council of Ministers, the Bailiffs Consultative Panel, and the Chair of the Comité de Connétable, and I now wish to seek the support of members. I propose the act, sir.
Is the proposition seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Those in favour of adopting the proposition kindly show. Those against? Proposition is adopted, apparently NEMCON, on the standing vote. Very well. The Assembly agreed earlier to take the next item as the last item of public business, which is the Proceeds of Crime Supervisory Bodies Supervised Business Amendment Jersey Regulations P3, lodged by the Minister for External Relations and Financial Services. The main respondent will be the Chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Proceeds of Crime Supervisory Bodies Supervised Business Amendment Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Article 44A of the Proceeds of Crime Jersey Law 1999.
Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. So these regulations amend the Proceeds of Crime Supervisory Bodies Jersey Law 2008. As I explained earlier, due to the volume of work that's been conducted in preparing for the Moneyval investigation coming later in the year, assessment later in the year, and a large amount of work, an error arose in the drafting. The officers fully accept the error and have apologised for the oversight. It was picked up very swiftly. What happened is that due to an error in the way the Proceeds of Crime, Consequential and Miscellaneous Jersey Regulations 2023 were drafted, the defined term supervised business was inadvertently deleted throughout the Proceeds of Crime Supervised Bodies Jersey Law 2008 and substituted with it Schedule 2 business, which has a narrower definition. Schedule 2 businesses comprises only businesses which are fully in scope for AML, which includes all financial services businesses, lawyers, estate agents, and accountants, and those businesses are all subject to full AML requirements. The term supervised business, which should have been used, includes not only Schedule 2 businesses, but also businesses carried on by prescribed NPOs. These prescribed NPOs are subject to a much lighter touch anti-money laundering regime and generally comprise non-profit organisations which raise funds of more than £1,000 from outside Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, England and Scotland, and who distribute sums of more than £1,000 outside those jurisdictions. The deletion of the term supervised business had unintended consequences on the ability of the Jersey Financial Services Commission to supervise prescribed non-profit organisations, which ability only came into effect on the 1st of January. So we then unwound that provision on the 18th of January this year. These regulations rectify this unintended consequence as a virtue of this error. The regulations will amend the law to reintroduce, in an amended form, the defined term supervised business and will give the FSC the supervisory powers regarding prescribed non-profit organisations and resolve this issue and allow it to prepare fully in respect of these types of businesses well before the Moneyval assessment. I therefore ask that States members adopt the proposition which will correct this error and reinstate the original intended policy position which we accepted at the end of last year. Sir, I propose the principles. Thank you.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? Those in favour of adopting the principles kindly show. Those against? Principles are adopted. Deputy Scott, does your panel wish to call the matter in?
No, sir.
How do you wish to deal with the matter in second reading, Minister?
I'd like to propose regulations en bloc, sir, please.
Are they seconded en bloc?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the regulations or any of them in second reading? Those in favour of adopting the regulations kindly show. Those against? Do you propose in third reading, Minister?
Yes, sir, please.
Are they seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
You call for the appel.
Yes, please, sir. Yes, please, sir.
I suggest you to open the voting. The vote is on the adoption of the regulations in third reading. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the referee to close the voting. The regulations are adopted in third reading. 42 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions.
So may I just offer the opportunity of thanking Deputy Miller for standing in on these issues?
Certainly. That concludes public business. Before we bring it formally to an end and call upon the Chair of PPC, I can announce the following proposition has been lodged by Deputy Mezek, Assembly consideration of the bilateral treaty with the UAE, P6 of 2023. Very well. Call upon the Chair of PPC to propose the arrangements for future business.
Thank you, sir. At the moment, we have a very short order paper for the City on the 28th of February. However, two propositions have been lodged today, both of which have been listed for the next meeting. P5 2023 from Deputy Andrews, which is the trainee minimum wage, and as the bailiff has said, P6 2023 from Deputy Mezek. There are a couple of items on the order paper that could take some time to debate, and therefore please ensure that you put aside Wednesday the 29th of February at least, which will be needed as a continuation day. Thank you.
So you propose those arrangements. Do members agree to the arrangement of public business proposed by the Chair of PPC? Very well. In which case that concludes the business of the Assembly, and the Assembly stands adjourned until the next time, which is the 28th of February at 9:30.